Hello all, welcome you all to our first workshop from Module 1 of our school program of managing children with special needs in a mainstream school. This program is sponsored by Ability. I am Revati and I'll be your host for today. In our today's session, we'll be focusing on the framework for understanding child development about developmental milestones and delays. This session would be conducted by Miss Rita Gendelman. She is an occupational therapist with an MS in OT. More about her a little later. Now, with no further ado, a quick introduction about ability.
Every child is unique and wants to thrive. Excellent carers can help a child blossom. To achieve excellence, educators and therapists require years of experience and mentorship. We at Ability are obsessed with how we can reduce this time to excellence by bringing the best knowledge from around the globe and yet make it very affordable. We believe this is very important to do for the community. Please join us in the movement to bring out the best in every child. As part of the movement, Ability has developed a free comprehensive school program through consultations with experts from various countries such as India, Philippines, Singapore, and USA. This program covers everything we need to know to help children with special needs in mainstream schools, starting from early childhood development and delays to knowledge of special needs conditions, setting up the right school environment, and finally, challenges and application of appropriate interventions in real life situations. All with the objective to help our educators, therapists, and parents improve the outcome of the children with special needs. This program comprises of 10 modules, and each module is delivered through live and on-demand workshops conducted by our expert practitioners who will provide all members with proven evidence and practice-based strategies and techniques which we can apply in our own respective settings. Depending on your needs, members can choose to attend the complete program or just one module and even just one workshop. Members can learn at your own pace, whenever, wherever you are via live and on-demand workshops. E-certificates will also be issued for the completion of every workshop, module, and program. In addition to the workshops, our experts and ability team have specially created several resources for you to download and share with anyone who can benefit from them. For every workshop you attend, we will also be sharing the relevant resources with you before and after your learning. Ability community members can also create your own resources and share them with the community through our platform. With this, there'll be many more resources and support coming your way. So spread the words to your families, colleagues, and friends about this free program and get them to sign up for the workshops. Together, we can impact more families of special needs in this world. Thank you, and we shall see you at the workshops.
Moving on, as you've already seen, in this program, this is the first workshop from our first module. We'll be having about 10 modules with over 60 plus workshops. Keep a track on the emails to keep receiving details from about each of the workshops and do register for the workshops that is of interest to you. And also, if you want to share about this program with your fellow colleagues and friends and you want to sign them up into the program, do check the link out that's being shared right now in the chat box and share the link with them for them to sign up for this program. Moving on, now let me introduce you all to our resource speaker for today. Ms. Rita Gendelman, she is a master's in occupational therapist and she specializes in helping children and young adults on autism spectrum, ADHD, cerebral palsy, learning disabilities for over 50 rich years. She's helped over 500 special families and their children. She's completed advanced and foundational training in a variety of modalities like sensory processing approach, MNRI reflex integration approach, handle approach, osteopathic techniques, sunrise method, and neuro-emotional techniques. She's also taught parents in educational workshops on topics such as sensory processing disorder, handling challenging behaviors, self-care for parents raising children with special needs. She is also mentoring and training supportive staff and caregivers to be able to work with families and their children with special needs. It's a pleasure to have you here with us today, ma'am. I hand over the podium to you. And we're looking forward to learn a lot and broaden our understanding about child development from you.
Revati, thank you so very much for such a beautiful introduction. It's an honor to be here. And I'm very, very passionate about supporting children with disabilities to be included as part of the MAID school curriculum. So without further ado, let's take a look at what we will be discussing today in our lecture. So just wanted to speak a little bit about the prevalence of developmental disabilities in the last couple of years and in the different types of diagnoses. Wanted to share with you some thoughts, different thoughts about what are the potential causes for children developing neurological deficits, delays, and what potentially could be causing that. We will be talking about the human brain, okay, just a little bit. And we will be talking about the theory of the triune brain. And I'll get into a little bit more detail about that and how that actually guides our human evolution. We will discuss the domains such as vision and hearing and sense of touch and movement, speech, social, emotional, and ability to use one's hand. And we will discuss the overall unfolding of, at what age approximately certain skills begin to emerge. And we will discuss about certain behaviors that show up and that prompt us to look a little bit deeper and figure out, well, what's going on? Does this child need help? Sometimes the signs are very, very obvious, and sometimes they're very, very subtle. And I want to discuss both. And I, of course, would love to hear your feedback, and I'm delighted and excited to answer some of your questions that you have. So that's what's on our agenda for today. So we are here discussing child's development, and what is child's development? It's actually this beautiful process of unfolding of a child beginning to develop skill, to gain mastery over their environment and engagement with the world. And when you can observe your child, whether it's your son or daughter, whether it's you're a therapist or a teacher, engage with the world in a way where the child's needs are met and clearly communicated, you know that the neurological process and the maturation process is unfolding. And eventually this child will become an independent being and part of this society and get his or her needs met. And why is it so important? Why are we discussing this child development? Because, what happens in early childhood fully influences everything we will do in our lives. So going back to understanding the milestones, understanding how there's a sequence of unfolding and looking and figuring out, what's going on? Where did things kind of slow down a little bit? And go back to that area and go back to that age and figure out, what occurred? What happened? How can we help this brain develop? Even though maybe this child is, 12 years old, or it's a teen, child, early adulthood, let's say a teen, you're dealing with a teen. It doesn't matter. We still need to look what happened early in life, what happened from 0 to 6, where maybe we can find solutions for the challenges that the individual is having present time. And that often happens when we look close enough. So let's look at some statistics, okay? I'm sure you're all aware of this, but I just wanted to put some numbers on this. So according to CDC, and this is the organization and monitors what's going on in the world and monitors what's going on with children with disability. And in America, from 2009 to 2017, there has been definitely an increase of children who have been diagnosed with a developmental disability. Okay, major increase. And that goes across the border for many diagnoses. So it's not just specifically related to autism. So we know that autism has been on the rise. However, it also ADHD, attention deficit disorder, or ADD, those are definitely on the rise. And children with developmental disabilities, children with intellectual disabilities, all of that is happening faster, and there's a prevalence of these children being diagnosed. And every single teacher that I speak to absolutely is telling me that compared to years before, they're right now dealing with a lot more children who need a lot more individual support in the classroom. And they are really needing help because they don't really know what to do. They're at a loss. And that's why I'm so honored to be here today, because I'd love to speak to those teachers and therapists who are not quite sure, what do we do? What's going on? So we're definitely going to jump into that. So here's some thoughts about what could potentially cause the increase or the rise of the children who are having a diagnosis of developmental delays and ADHD and autism. And some people agree with these reasons. Some people don't. You decide for yourself. I just wanted to give you an option just to take a look and see, well, how do you feel? What comes to mind when you are thinking about these ideas that this possibly could contribute to difficulty in child development? So possibly food that lacks nutrition, okay, because of the soil, because of the lacking minerals, because of how we are cultivating food in the agricultural system, because mom was, abusing alcohol, and mom was not taking care of herself while she was, pregnant. That one we kind of know that's a big contributor to developmental delays. Smoking, drugs, anything like that, of course, significantly challenges and impacts the child's development. Traumatic birth. There has been a lot of discussion about how does a child's birth, how do we come into this world? Does that influence our development? And there is a lot of data stating that is very, very important. And that is a transition that is very unique. And that children who have their, with the cord wrapped around their neck, or who pulled out with forceps, or were delivered via cesarean section, there is a lot of correlation that might contribute to a delay in a child's physical, emotional, and cognitive development. Toxicity in food, toxicity in our environment, toxicity in the paint that we're exposed to. There's just, a lot of research done about the environmental toxicity and how that influences the brain, especially a brain of a young developing child. So, support mom's well-being, emotional well-being, bonding with your child. What's going on? Can you breastfeed your child? Did you have a chance to breastfeed your child? Was your baby able to latch on to the nipple? All of that is very, very important part of the nurturing process. And when that is not available or interrupted, it's important to pay attention to that and to figure out, well, okay, that occurred. So now what can we do? And there's a lot of different things that you can do. So I just want to make sure that we all understand, even though those mothers who have, given birth through a cesarean section or have not been able to bond with their child and were not able to breastfeed, it's all possible to recover those skills. It just takes a little time and a little patience, but all of that is possible. I've seen that happen many, many times. I'm a strong believer of tummy time. Tummy time is really, I believe, really important for child's physical development. And I don't see enough of that, and not enough of education about that, and also a lot of fear about, child suffocating and dying because of SIDS, and that if child is on their tummy a lot, they might, die. And there is there's a lot of controversy about that, but there is a way to do tummy time that's very, very safe. Swaddling, that is very, very important, very important. Deep pressure, touch, massaging your child, all of that, all of those things really contribute to child's development very, very much. A child who does not have a chance to explore and they're being carried all the time, or they're stuck in a stroller or a walker, that also hinders child's development, because a child in the first year of life, they're supposed to really be on the floor. They're supposed to experience the floor and experience how their body moves against the floor. That is so foundational for what's going to happen in the future of this child. And now, of course, we all know this right now, the world we live in, screen time. It's impossible to get away from it. I'm not someone who says never do screen time. We have to live with the modern world. Screen time is okay. It's just a matter of balance, because it does influence the very young brain. So today we are focusing on the neurological development of a child. So when we are talking about neurology is the interface between us and the world. So information is coming in and we have to respond to it. And the way we do that is through sensing and feeling the information that's coming in, through touch, through smell, through taste, through sound. And that is happening outside of our control. We have no choice. We are designed to receive information, and information from the outside shapes us. And as we respond to the world, we shape the world. And it's a beautiful process of this receptivity and response back and forth that allows us and drives the neural pathways to develop the thinking brain. It is very deeply connected. So here's what I wanted to ask everyone, the audience, and you can just chime in. When it comes to the evolution of the human brain, what do you think develops first? The sensing or the feeling, or the thoughts? And just chime in, let me know. I think I can look at the, can I look at the, I'm not sure if I can see the chat box. Maybe Revati,
I'll help you out with it, man. So
I appreciate
a lot of responses on senses getting developed first. A lot of our participants are saying senses.
Beautiful.
Sense
Okay,
of
thank you.
feeling gets developed first.
Okay, beautiful. Well, you're a very intelligent audience. Thank you. But absolutely, 100%. This is not information that is necessarily known to everyone, and it's not something that's really discussed or addressed directly, but 100%, the feeling and the sensation of our body, that is the part that is developed first, 100%. Thoughts are dependent on our ability to feel and our ability to sense. So when we're speaking about sensation and feeling, and that develops first, we're also talking about a frame of reference that talks about bottom-up development. Why is it called bottom-up? It's actually quite simple, because if you look at the development of the brain, information is coming in through the pathways, okay, through the nerves, coming in from the outside, coming in from the inside of our body, and then it travels always through the lower part of the brainstem. That's the part that is here, okay? So it's the first one where all the sensation enters first. And then it goes a little bit higher, and then it hits the thinking brain. So bottom up means that we are starting from the bottom. We are addressing sensing and feeling, and we're taking into account that as the primary mode of development. And when we're talking about top down, we're talking about an approach that is addressing the cognitive, the thinking, the problem solving, the logical way of addressing the brain and how it develops. Now, both are needed, but I want us to understand the importance of sensing and feeling, because often when I'm watching a therapist and when I'm watching a school teacher, with the best of intentions, they typically address child's development from the top down. They are talking about thinking, organizing, they're talking about details, sequencing, and all of that has to do with that higher level thinking in the hierarchy of the brain. It's not really dealing with the sensation of the feeling of the body. And I want to focus on that today, only because that is a conversation that's rarely had and not given enough voice. But I do want to say that it's important when we're talking about the brain, we're talking about bottom up, top down. We need both. So here's the triune braid theory, okay? So let's have fun with this. Before I go into the details of the function of each part of the brain, I'm just going to throw out some scenarios or, images, and I want you to put in the chat box, where do you think that belongs? Is that the function of the thinking brain, the mammalian brain, or the lizard brain? And the mammalian brain is actually also known as the emotional brain. So I wanted to, let me throw out a scenario. A child quickly withdraws from hot water. Is that the lizard brain? Is that the emotional mammalian brain? Or is that the thinking brain? If you can put your responses in the chat box, I would really appreciate that.
So we already have a lot of response, ma'am. So our participants are saying lizard brain.
The lizard brain, okay. Great. Okay, 100%. So the lizard brain, you don't have to think. You're touching something hot, and if you have sensation and you can feel through your skin and you can feel the heat, you immediately withdraw. So absolutely, that is the lizard brain. Thank you so much. Now, planning your day, figuring out what you're going to wear, figuring out what you're going to eat. What part of the brain is responsible for that primarily? Is it the lizard, the thinking, or the emotional?
So we have a response. It's thinking uniformly from most of our audience.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you so much. Absolutely. And then a child crying while watching a movie, something touched him. What brain is that?
So it's mammalian for most of our participants.
Okay, beautiful. So that's right. Absolutely. Emotions, feeling, social connections, that's driven by the emotional part of the brain. Absolutely. So thank you so much for engaging and participating. So let's just go a little bit deeper into each part of the brain, okay? So according to the human evolution, as we developed, okay, when we look back to the hunters and gathering societies, we're talking about the survival brain that responds to danger. So if there's danger around us, if there is sense of if there's a smoke alarm and there's something on the stove and it's burning, we right away are paying attention. What's going on? Oh my God, we got to make sure that we turn the stove off. We got to make sure everything's safe so nothing burns. Okay, so that's our survival brain saying, okay, we're detecting that burning smell. We got to figure it out. What's going on? We're right away, we're on alert. Okay, so danger and scanning for danger is really responsible. The primary job of the reptilian brain, the lizard brain, the survival brain. It has many different names. It's really all about scanning for danger, moving away from danger, responding to danger. That's the primary job. And then also our ability to breathe, our ability to pump our heart, all of that are those vital signs are driven by that reptilian brain that allows us basically to feel and to be, not to feel, but to actually be alive. So when we wake up in the morning, what allows us to pump our heart and to be able to breathe, take a deep breath, it's that reptilian brain that is connecting us to ourselves. And the reptilian brain, it's all about me. Me. I don't care about anyone else. It's about my needs and my survival. Very, very, very important to remember that. So let me ask you a question. Those of you, especially those of you who are teachers, but of course, obviously parents as well, but teachers, when the child is in that me mode, is that a good time to teach a child a new skill? And obviously anyone can answer this. But I'm just curious, what are your thoughts about that?
So we've received majority of no, but a few of yes also from our participants.
Okay, oh, interesting. So there are a few yeses. Okay, that's good to know. So in my personal experience in general, and I'm speaking, I don't really have clear rules that I subscribe to because, I'm present with every individual and every child is very unique. So rules are a little bit difficult, rule bound because situation, we have to be able to adapt to the present moment. But in general, When you see a child and you identify the behavior as it's all about me, this child is in survival mode, it is not the best time to teach a child anything new. Because what happens is the survival brain will always win, always. The survival brain could not care less what you can add 2 plus 2. It does not care at all. It only cares about your ability to run away from danger, confront danger, be able to take a deep breath, be able to know when you're hungry, be able to go to sleep, and have reflexes that allow you to run away or protect yourself from danger. That's it. This is really important to remember, because when you're asking a child to problem solve, you're asking a child to read, to write, to do mathematics or geometry. And if that child is in, it's all about me, it's all about me, I'm surviving, I don't feel safe, that child is nowhere near available for learning. Their thinking brain is hijacked and shut down. And your attempt to try to educate this child in that moment is going to be futile and fall on deaf ears. And it's going to be energetically draining. It's going to be a lot of effort, and most likely you will not get anywhere. So it is really important to know before you start the teaching process, is this child available for learning? And if he is not, stop teaching them anything new. We got to do something else. We got to address the safety and security and comfort of this child or this young adult. And what's going on? How can we help them feel safe in their own bodies before teaching them anything new, especially when it requires the higher level thinking brain? And I will say this over and over and over again, because this is so foundational, and it's where I feel is the biggest confusion. When I see educators try to educate children, they're not in touch with, is this a good time to teach? And even though they're supposed to teach, and you have a curriculum, and you have a deadline, and I understand you have a structure you need to follow, but it doesn't matter what structure you need to follow. If the child cannot learn, it doesn't matter what agenda you have. And it's really important to sometimes drop your agenda and just focus on what is going to make this child feel safe. Really, really important. We're going to discuss this at length throughout the session. We're going to discuss this in terms of how can we help a child to be able to prepare for learning. But this is the foundation for everything, absolutely everything. So speaking about the emotional brain, and it would probably be inaccurate to really say that this is the second to develop. It all slowly develops kind of more or less together, but in comparison, the survival brain has much more engagement, has much more of a driving force in the early stages of our life when it comes to development. Okay, the emotional brain is also there, always there, but expression of emotion, understanding emotions comes in definitely much, much later. So emotional brain is the part that allows us to actually be human, allows us to connect with others, allows us to experience emotions, allows us to connect and feel what is the other person feeling. It's the tribal social cloak of what keeps us human and connected and responsive to one another. Very important, obviously. And the emotional part of the brain allows us to actually tap into our short-term memory and create memories. So it's really, really important to remember that memory has a lot to do with how important is something emotionally to this individual, and it taps into their motivation. When we are teaching individuals, whether they're on the disability spectrum, whether they are undiagnosed, or whether they're just a child sitting in your classroom and they're typically developing, if they're not motivated, it is very difficult to get them to create memories and to actually connect with the learning process. So emotions, motivation, curiosity, connections with others, it's the mammalian or the emotional brain. That's its function. That is its domain. And it's a really important part of the learning process. And often left out, very often. And that is the glue that allows a child to want to continue to learn and to be curious about learning. So once again, we'll discuss this further. And the last one is the neocortex, is the last one to develop. And it's the thinking brain. It's the one that we're mostly familiar with. This is the brain that allows us to reason, to understand, to problem solve. This is the one that allows to read and learn and write and do mathematics in our mind. And this is the one that allows us, and it's This thinking brain is so important because it allows us to reflect. It allows us to become conscious of our actions. So if the information from the body never reaches the higher level thinking brain, we have very little consciousness. We become reflexive and we act on autopilot. And very often you see children often responding like an autopilot. They're just immediately responding without even thinking. They're either moving away from something, or they're aggressive, or they're biting, or they're falling down, or they're just shut down and they freeze, or they become withdrawn, or they don't want to, you're introducing something new and they immediately withdraw and they don't want to learn anything new. So these children are having a hard time connecting to the higher level of the brain. And they're still operating their survival or the emotional brain that's slightly disorganized. And it prevents them from accessing this reasoning, this conscious part of their brain that gives them feedback on their conscious actions. It's the only way that the process of learning can fully actually come full circle, is when it reaches the thinking brain and we can now analyze, oh, what just happened? Oh, what is the best way to respond? How can we learn from this experience? That's the thinking brain. That's the higher level reasoning that is always giving back the feedback to our bodies so we can create a new action if it's needed. And that's how we learn to adapt to our environment. And that's how we work with our environment. So obviously, this part is really important, but it cannot work on its own. And it cannot work independently without the support of the survival brain and the emotional brain. They need to work together. They all need to be organized. And there is a hierarchy at which we need to look at and prioritize when we are engaging a child in the learning process, okay? And I just want to mention this, that a well-integrated brain, once again, is able to receive information from the senses, from our ability to feel. It's able to receive information from the visual system, and it's able to receive information from our top-down thinking process and reasoning process. So the brain really has to be able to multitask and receive information from the bottom, from the top, from the front. And when they work together, when the brain functions well, the systems, the different systems of the brain communicate with each other. And that's when you have a whole brain functioning well. And that's when the learning process is optimal. Most of the time when we have a child with a disability and there's a delay that we're observing, probably there is a lack of connectivity between the different parts of the brain, and most likely they're in survival mode. And we need to be very conscious of that. So just taking a closer look, I'm just going to go over the terms of like overall development of the child from 0 to 6 years of age. And I just want to say there are many different assessments that evaluate the development of a child, from 0 to 6, movement, mobility, hand development, social emotional development, everything that we will discuss. There are many different assessments. Some are more detailed, some are less detailed. Today, I'm giving you a snapshot, okay? And then I will focus on specific aspects of the development during the early years of life that usually goes unnoticed. I want to create connections for all of you, how the thinking is deeply connected to our ability to sense and feel. It's something that, once again, it's a conversation that's really missing from the teaching approaches. Okay, so let's take a look. And by the way, just to give you an overall, the more organized the brain is, the more function we have available. The less organized the brain is, the less function we have available. This is how we operate, okay? So when we have, less disorganization, we have diagnoses that are showing up like dyslexia, like Down syndrome, challenges, responding to the world, engaging to the world, socializing. All of that shows up when the neurology is compromised, when that survival is taking over, okay? So what I'm talking about is really child development is basically organizing the brain. Just like when we are traveling somewhere and you are on a highway, you know exactly what exit to take, you know when to jump off, jump on the ramp, to jump off the ramp, you know the direction you're going in. That's organization. And our neurology is designed to be organized and receive information, and it has all these different relay stations, but eventually it goes up to the top and it's processed up there. So if that process goes smoothly, everything is really easy. But if that process is interrupted for many different reasons, then we have to pay attention. We have to see, well, where do we start? What's happening here? Okay, so we are going to be talking about how the child develops in the first 6 years of life, and we're looking at the survival brain, the emotional and thinking brain. Okay, that's the development. So if we take a look at vision, this is so foundational, so important, how vision develops and how important it is to a child's ability to learn. So if we look at this, so for example, birth to 2 months, there is this skill, child ability to track people and objects. And it's basically looking and seeing. So if mom is moving, where's mom moving? And looking and following her. Where is she going? And using your eyes to track where she's going. Or if there's ball rolling, looking at where is this ball rolling? What's going on? Or you're moving your hand and connecting with your hands visually, and you're seeing, oh, my hands are moving this way. My eyes can connect with my hands and move with my hands. So, and then there's also a skill a little bit later on, 2 to 8 months old, where eyes work together as a team. Here's what I want to say about this. This is development is so early in life, yet children who are sitting in your classrooms or on your caseload, or parents who are not misunderstanding what's going on with their children, very often it's the child's inability to have their eyes work together as a team. It has nothing to do with acuity and 20/20 vision. It has everything to do with how eyes work together. It's like binoculars that you have to adjust in order to get clarity. So 2 eyes have to really work together in order to be able to focus on an object. What happens very often is that children who have neurological deficits, their eyes are not working together, and the vision is distorted, and often they could see blurry vision. Their vision is blurred, and they cannot focus on a specific letter or number or what they're looking at. Or there is this symptom where children share this, the ones who can communicate, who are a little older, who have challenges. They've said that they're actually letters are jumping off the paper. They can't control it. They're just jumping off the paper. So there's a lot of really, really interesting things that are happening with the visual system where the eyes are not working together as a team. So what is really, really important? As a therapist, what I do is I make sure that this child gets their vision checked, and not by an ophthalmologist or not by an optometrist. What I do is I ask the parents to take the child to a developmental optometrist or a behavioral optometrist. It's a very different aspect of vision. And that is very important because I have observed so many kids be aggressive, be avoidant of homework, not wanting to learn, be so disorganized. And of course, that is such a stress for the teachers, for the parents. They go get prism glasses, and prism glasses are very unique glasses that allow the child to be more aware of the peripheral vision and to be more aware of depth perception and how the eyes work together. And I cannot tell you the miracles that I see. You could literally, from day to day, you have a different child. When you can address vision, you have a different child completely. So please, those teachers, parents, therapists who are listening, remember the importance of vision, and that actually even from the moment like 0 to 2 months or 2 to 8 months, this is like survival emotional part of the brain. This has nothing to do with thinking. And this is so important to address vision. Very, very, very important. Please have that on your radar. So as vision develops, we have more refined ability to see details, and we have more ability to connect different shapes, different objects. We're able to understand. But once again, that basic ability to have the eyes work together as a team is foundational. If that's not working, then everything else is going to be very, very challenging and confusing. Okay, so I hope if you can take this and remember this for the rest of your life. So hearing and understanding, okay? So hearing, really, really important. Let's look at this specific skill. 2 to 8 months old, successfully filters sound and stays on task. So once again, children with neurological challenges very often are unable to filter out what's going on in the background from the foreground. So everything is coming in at the same time and there is no difference. So you speaking, the truck passing by, somebody making sounds, it's all coming in at the same time. It is overwhelming. It is exhausting. And what's confusing is that a lot of times, because a child cannot discern sounds and cannot separate foreground from background, they're labeled as, learning disability, or they're labeled as, having lower intelligence or lower IQ. I cannot tell you, this drives me nuts, because so often visual and auditory issues have nothing to do with the IQ. The IQ is fantastic. The thinking process has no issues. But if you can't see what you're looking at, if you cannot pay attention, if you're distracted by sounds, once again, it's that survival part of the brain that takes over, and you cannot think because you're constantly taking care of yourself, because you're constantly overwhelmed. So having an auditory test and hearing test and understanding what's going on inside the ears is extremely important. Okay, so teachers who are listening, please remember that you got to talk to parents and you got to give them guidance. Go get your child tested, see what's possible, what is going on outside of the thinking process that supports the thinking process. So I was just curious, can you give me a little bit of feedback? Does this make sense? Do you understand how the sensitivity to sound, or how the visual system, when it's compromised, and when these very, very, very early skills that have not been developed are influencing a child's ability to learn when they're in the classroom, when they're doing homework, when you are asking them to develop to learn? Can you just give me some feedback of what you're hearing and what how this lands for you?
Most of our participants are saying that they're loving it and they are feeling that it's absolutely true and important for them to become aware of all the things that you're talking about.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Ravati. I appreciate it. And then hearing and understanding. What is really, really interesting, I want to make a connection. Understanding, so let's look at this. Understanding the time relationship of a typical day. So let's talk about time just for a moment. Understanding the sequence of time. Hearing relates to that. Understanding what to expect, what's happening from moment to moment. Understanding schedules. Okay. Hearing has a lot to do with our ability to be connected to space. Space and time work together. So when a child does not have that connection with self, does not have that connection with gravity, does not have a good connection with their body, they get lost of where I am, where's up, where's down, where's left, where's right, over, under. All of that is very difficult. That automatic sensation of knowing where you are in space is critical to understanding auditory processing, because space, when you are dealing with space, sounds are coming in and you need to know where are sounds coming from. So if you're confused where sounds are coming from, it's going to be very hard to really understand what's coming in. And this feeling of understanding where you are located in space also really relates to time as well. Okay, so those are very, very connected. So understanding this connection to space has a lot to do with our balance system and our movement system. So when a child has auditory processing issues, and you could see that they have a hard time understanding instructions, or they have hard time understanding what they are reading or what is being read to them, or responding to a question, also remind yourself that maybe there is some there's some challenge of their understanding of themselves where they are in space. And it would be really good to refer them to an occupational therapist, refer them to a physical therapist, figure out what's going on with their balance system. Are they able to really know where they are? And that connects to understanding and receiving sound very, very deeply. Okay. So I'm just making connections from a perspective as an occupational therapist who is looking at the body system and how it supports our ability to think. So when it comes to touch, touch is just an ability to bond. Touch is our ability to feel ourselves. Touch allows us to know where our boundaries are. Where do we begin and end? Touch allows us to connect with another human being. So when the touch system is disorganized, we have children who are afraid of being next to somebody. They're uncomfortable sitting down and being in their seat. They're uncomfortable looking at someone in the eye. And touch also really, really affects the auditory system, because part of processing sensation through this sound, the system of touch supports our ability to process auditory information. So see how everything works together. So if you see a child who is avoiding being touched, or afraid of being touched, or running away from others, or doesn't want to be standing next to someone else, or the opposite, they cannot get enough touch. They're constantly looking and seeking. How do we rub against somebody? How do we push against somebody? How do we jump on somebody? How do we squeeze ourselves? How do we hug somebody? So that also has a lot to do with the touch system and the deep pressure system that works together to support a child's body development, body map, knowing where they are in relationship to others, where the body parts are in relationship to each other, and knowing how they relate to others. This is really, really, really important. And it's also very important in terms of emotional development. Touch, like mother's touch, when you bond with someone, you develop your feeling, your sensing, and you will learn your emotional capacity to feel yourself and to be with others. So deep pressure touch can take you a long way. And just something as simple as a child who's really disorganized and hyper, if you come up to them and just put your hand on their shoulder and give them some deep pressure, calmly, without talking, so often that subtle gesture really helps that child connect and relax and feel safe, because now they feel, oh, okay, I got it. I feel more relaxed. I feel my body. Somebody's next to me. I'm able to be more conscious and aware of where I am in relationship to myself and others. And that is so important. And once again, that's all about survival. It has nothing to do with thinking. It's all about feeling, okay? So just touch develops as a child is born, and you touch your child, you rock your child, you squeeze your child. That's how touch develops. Very natural part of the process of development. And then when it comes to touch, exploration with touch, think about geometrical shapes. When you're looking at a picture of a triangle, it's very hard sometimes to conceptually just look at a triangle and think, well, this is a triangle. How do you understand a triangle on the picture? So how do you understand a triangle? A baby touches things, throws things, break things, move things further away, move things closer. A baby learns through touch. So a baby that touched a triangle, felt its texture, those different shapes and sorting shapes and feeling it in its hand and squeezing it and throwing it and licking it and biting it, that feeds that system of touch and builds memories of, wow, so this looks like a triangle. When I touch it, that's what a triangle looks like. Mommy says this is a triangle. Now, when I see it on the picture, I have a deep understanding and a relationship what a triangle means because I've touched and felt it. If a child had a difficult time with their system of touch and there was not developed or disorganized, very often I see children who are unable to recognize shapes. Why? Because they don't have the tactile sensation to understand shapes. So what do? We go back to touch and feel and activating that, organizing that system of touch to help them understand shapes. And that's how touch relates to cognition, relates to thinking, okay? So really, really, really important. Movement, okay? So movement is what actually develops the brain and develops the different parts of the brain. So as the child is maneuvering through the world, pushing themselves up against gravity, feeling, oh, what happens to my body if I raise my head? Oh, if I raise my head a little further away, all of a sudden, I could see a little further. Oh, is there anything interesting I can pay attention to? Maybe I could crawl over there and touch it. So you have the visual system, you have the sound system, you have the touch, you have the movement system. Movement develops literally every part of the brain. because this is the way we are designed. As you move, you're constantly getting feedback through the system of touch, through the system of balance, through what you're seeing, through your curiosity to the object that you're going towards. And all of that happens together. That's why movement is so important, and movement for children is so important. And when we talk next week about how do you help your children plug into learning, how do you help them transition from this survival, I'm scared of the world place, into I feel safe, I'm okay, I'm open to learning. Movement is a very big part of it, and we will discuss specific strategies of how to do that with your children. And I just wanted to let you know that it's so interesting how we're thinking about cognition in school, but actually we need to look at what happened in the first year of life to connect that to the child's learning process. I think that's fascinating. I'm fascinated by that. And I love exploring, well, what's going on? What aspect are we going to look at? So speech, of course, if we all want speech, we all want our children to speak, because speech is something that really allows us to, socially engage with the world. And speech is actually, develops much, much later. Once again, movement and sensation comes in first. Speech has a lot to do with our ability to breathe. And if you cannot breathe in a way that allows you to feel relaxed, your speech is going to be compromised, because your diaphragm is very important in how you speak, how many words you say, how quickly you speak. And very often I see kids who cannot breathe properly. So it's really important to pay attention to breath. Now, as a teacher, you might not be paying attention to breath yourself, but just be aware that there are therapists who need to be reminded that breath is important. And that when they work with their children, that to really be reminded, how can you enhance their capacity to breathe slower and to take in more oxygen? Because that relates to speech directly. Motivation and curiosity also relates to speech. So why would a child want to say anything if they're not interested in that object? So what I see very often is that the motivation is lacking, and someone is teaching a child, like a speech therapist is teaching a child to say, I don't know, what are we teaching to say? I don't know, pineapple, let's say, okay? But this child might not be at all interested in the pineapple. What if this child is interested in mango? So if the child is not interested in what you're trying to teach them, they're going to be much less likely to speak. And I actually have experience with many, many children who are just rudely speaking. They're saying words that are not relevant at all to the conversation, and they're not relevant at all to what they're feeling. They just learned words, and they have this rote memory where they need to just say those words that is not connected to their beingness, their emotions, their curiosity about the world. They're actually shut down inside. So whenever we're talking about speech, we want to make sure that motivation and curiosity is important. Breath is really important. And ability to explore is really important. And I'll give you some strategies of how do you invite a child to actually want to speak. Because some children have capacity to speak and their muscles are working well together, but they're not speaking. They're still not speaking, because they might feel that, what they have to say is not even important. So speech and emotions are really, really, really important. Let's see. So hand development, really, really, obviously, that's important. Hand development has a lot to do with our ability to think. So thinking and hand development goes hand in hand. So the more capacity we have in our ability to manipulate our fingers and our palms and our hands and have our hands work together, the more it allows us to develop our brain, because neurologically, hands and thinking goes together. So we could always see a child who's able to have good handwriting, or a child who's able to hold a pen or a pencil and they are writing accurately. You could see that they're conscious about understanding what they're thinking, and they could put that on paper. So that is a deep connection between thinking and expression. Forgive me, I just need to take a little water. Oh my God. And of course, hand function has a lot to do with our engagement with the world. How curious are you about the world? Are you interested in reaching into the world? Do you want to touch somebody? Do you want to bring an object closer to you and explore it? And once again, when you bring an object closer to yourself and you look at it and you play with it and you're curious about it, it builds your ability to think, to problem solve, to understand the world from different perspectives, from many different ways, if you are interested in exploring that object. The ability to have hand dominance is also very important for organization of the brain. So just be aware that if a child has mixed dominance of they're using left hand for writing and a right hand for eating, or left hand for kicking a ball, and they're mixing their feet, sometimes they kick with left, sometimes they kick with right. Very important. So if you notice that, that's one of the red flags I'll discuss a little later, where you need to really refer this child to a neurological evaluation, physical therapy, occupational therapy. What's going on? Why is this child not able to clearly define that he's using his left hand only or his right hand only? Okay, so that's a representation of the inner world of the brain. And then we have the social emotional part, which is of course so important. And once again, shows interest in the environment. Is the child interested in the environment? So many children are withdrawn, they're disconnected, they're not curious. And if you see a child is withdrawn and disconnected and not curious, we got to really dig a little deeper. What's happening? Why is this child shut off? Why is he disconnected? Is the world too much for him? Are his senses overwhelmed? Does he feel or does she feel that the parents or the child or the therapist are not hearing him or not understanding his needs? I don't know. There's many different, ways where we can start fine-tuning and figuring out what's going on. How can we bring this child back to connection, back to enjoying the world, back to wanting to be curious about the world? That is so important. And emotional development has everything to do with curiosity and the joy of exploration. Really important. And of course, social emotional development has so many aspects to it, and ability to connect with others, ability to have empathy, develop empathy, ability to engage in play, ability to want to play with others, ability to be motivated, ability to initiate a task. That's all to do with social emotional understanding of yourself and the world. And there's many ways that we can assess, well, what's going on here? And usually we assess if there is a problem by looking at child's behavior. And we're going to dive in a little bit into, well, what are some of the red flags? What's happening? What's actually going on with this child? And what can we do to support him or her? Okay, so before we go to the red flags, just wanted to share the importance of this inter-hemispheric communication. So in the very beginning, so this is our right brain and this is the left brain. And we're talking about the top layer, the cortex, we're talking about the neocortex. The two sides of the brain need to communicate with each other. However, initially from birth to 2 years old, the right side is the leader. And that's the emotional, that's the feeling, that's the big picture, that's the creative part of who we are as human beings. That's the one to develop first. That's why when we're engaging a child in the learning process, it's really important to be creative. It's really important to introduce play, to really be engaging, and to make sure you pull out a child's curiosity. Because that right brain needs to be engaged. And then it switches over a little later. From 2 to 4 years old, we have more of the left brain connection, where now there's a little more organization, a little more of sequencing, a little more of timing is coming in. There's more rhythm and understanding of how your rhythm is connected to your mom's rhythm, and your rhythm is connected to sleep and wake cycles and transitions. All of that is starting to come in. And then it switches back a little bit more to the right brain from 4 to 6 years old. And then it goes back to 6 and 8 on the left brain. And then between 8 and 10, this is where really this left and right brain begin to work together as a team. Just like the eyes have to work together as a team, the left and right brain need to work together as a team. Really, really, really important. So we need to stimulate both hemispheres with logic and reason, and with creativity and curiosity and play. Both needs to come to play. Both needs to come into connection so that the child has an easier way to learn. Okay, so I just wanted to go through some of the red flags that allows us to understand, well, wow, what's going on? Obviously there's something happening with this child and we need to pay attention. And some of the red flags I'll mention are very obvious. I just wanted to share them because they're there, because we know about it, and I just want to make sure we're on the same page. And then I'll share some of the subtle signs that I believe are a little more subtle and not as easily noticeable. And if anyone has any red flags that they want to share that I did not in any way identified or I did not mention, I'm very happy to always hear that, and you can always give me that feedback. So alertness, activity, presence, this is all about this basic primitive brain. Survival, 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 okay? Is the child engaging with the world? Is the child disconnected and withdrawn? Are they feeling safe? Are they not feeling safe? Are they constantly on the go? Are they can't sit still? Are they able to pay attention? Are they engaging in these repetitive, constant motions, repetitive vocalizations that are nonstop, that are happening all the time? They're interrupting their flow, interrupting their ability to learn. And I know we all have seen these behaviors. Some children are in these behaviors nonstop. Some children are engaging in them 30% of their time, some 40. It all depends. And it's really important when you see this behavior. What do you do? How do you respond? Really, really, really important, okay? Really important. So then we have physical development. A child who avoids, sports at all costs, really important to notice and ask, well, you don't know that when the child is sitting in the classroom. You don't know if the child is avoiding sports or not. But if you see some subtleties where the child has difficulty attending and the child cannot really sit still or has a poor, hand development, you start to see some signs that maybe there's some muscle weakness. Maybe there's coordination challenges. So you want to dig deeper. You want to start asking parents what goes on outside of the classroom, if you can, and if the child is avoiding physical activity at all costs, you really want to make sure that you ask them for a neurological evaluation, you suggest it to the parent. You want to make sure that you have them evaluated or physical or occupational therapist, and to see what's going on with this child. Does he need support with the sensation, with processing balance, with processing touch? If the child is, has poor posture, falling down, clumsy, is having difficulty with writing, with doing arts and crafts, all those things are telltale signs. Something's going on neurologically. There's really like lack of maturity in the nervous system, lack of organization. So let's pay attention a little more. Is there something we're missing? How can we support this child? Have we done enough investigating to know where to begin? Socially, emotionally, development. So children who are tantruming, who are aggressive, who are defiant, who have difficulty transitioning, who don't want to share their toys, all of those children obviously have a lot of difficulties regulating themselves emotionally. And they're most likely in survival mode. And those children are in the world of me, 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 me. It's all about me. It's all about me. So when you see that child, you want to make sure that you first and foremost make sure that you take a step back before trying to teach them anything new. You want to assess, this child is completely right now in survival mode. Okay, duly noted, consciously aware. Okay, good to know. What's the next step? What do we do? And we will discuss that in the next session. Communication, child who is disorganized speech, does not respond to their name, does not track verbal, non-verbal communication, has a hard time reading cues, does not spontaneously communicate their emotions, their feelings, what's going on in their world. Those are children who obviously have speech difficulty. And if they have speech difficulty, most likely they have challenges with their ability to process auditory information. So you want to make sure that you figure out what's going on with their ears and what's going on with their balance system. And then cognitively, once again, these are the things we all know. Cognitively, reading comprehension, following instructions, understanding past, present, future, time, math skills, writing skills, understanding and identifying shapes, colors, letters, numbers. That's all showing up as a symptom that is showing up through cognition, but it might not be a cognitive issue. That's what I really want to make sure that you understand. It might be something totally different. It might be just that their balance system is off and they don't know where they are in space, and they have a hard time with mathematical concepts, because in math, remember, it has a lot to do with space. You have to line up the equation, you have to know up and down, you have to be able to add the numbers, and you have to know in sequence what you have to do. And if you don't relate to space well, and you don't know where you are in space, understanding mathematical concepts, it's going to be extremely, extremely difficult. So just some of the other, I believe these are subtle signs. Maybe for you, they're not, but I just wanted to share that. If the child is way too quiet, or if the child is not curious, or if the child is labeled as lazy. And I have to say, I have it's a little bit of a pet peeve of mine when the child is labeled lazy. There are no lazy children. There's no such thing as lazy children. There are children who are not motivated. There are children who are feeling unsafe. There are children who are shut down because they feel they're not seen and they're not heard. There is no such a thing as a lazy child. I am 100% sure of that. Never seen one yet. A child who has a flat affect is not expressing their emotions. You know, a child where you see their eyes are just dull. There's no life in there. There's no vitality. So you want to make sure that you pay attention to those subtleties, to the face, to the eyes, what's going on. Even if the child is doing their best to learn, still you get to see through their facial expressions and through their eyes, what's going on with this child? Is he really here? Is he really with us? Refusal to do homework. A lot of children don't want to do homework because they cannot rely on their vision. They cannot sit still because their balance system or their system of touch is taking them out of the present moment, and they're constantly distracted. So they have a hard time sitting still because they can't feel themselves. So that's all a sign of, well, something is going on. Something is going on. It's not that my child just wants to be oppositional. It just wants to be defined. There's a reason for it. Disorganized and fear-based art. So I get a lot, those children who actually can draw a little bit, even if it's just a stick figure, I get to see what's going on in the mind of this child. And I get to see, well, is the drawing organized? Is there anything that, is there any, you know, the child, is he putting in where there is crying going on? Is there a child that is, you know, drawing witches or drawing, you know, ghost, or is there a child that is floating in the air? So you got to watch and see if the child is able to draw and express themselves through art. What is they communicating? Are there any signs of challenges that is going on emotionally through the art? Okay, really important. Also, their self-image and conception of how they perceive themselves. I often, if a child is able, I ask them to do a draw picture of a stick figure. And let me tell you, that little assessment is so revealing, because you get to see, if the child draws really big eyes, you get to know that, oh my gosh, they are really relying on their visual system, and their visual system is probably so exhausted and so overwhelmed because they're just relying on their visual system and they don't have a body. They didn't draw a body, or they drew a big head with big eyes and like small necks, small arms, small legs, because they're not aware that they have a body. Often our children just think all they have is a head and eyes, and they don't even know they have a body. And that is really, really, really takes away from their ability to learn in a safe and effective manner. Left and right dominance, I told you, when you see that a child is switching hands all the time, that means that there's a neurological disorganization, and it requires a physical therapy or an occupational therapist or a neurologist to get involved and figure out what's going on with this child. Why are they confused about their left and right side of the brain? And of course, we know this, if child all of a sudden their behavior changed from one day to the other, we know that something is going on. And I've seen this happen. A child, you know, if there's something traumatic that happens, a pet died, or they moved to a new location, or parents got divorced, just being aware that there are other dynamics that are influencing children and how their ability to learn. So does a child respond to subtle changes? So I've seen children who are so withdrawn that you put something in front of them and they don't even know it's there. So then you know clearly, obviously, something is going on with this child's perception, that they're not plugged in, they're not available, they're not there. So they can't really learn. If they're withdrawn and disconnected, they cannot learn at all. And if a child is the opposite, they're obsessed to have things a certain way. This is the only way it has to be. This puzzle has to be this way, and it has to be done in this corner, and it has to be done on the floor, and it cannot be done on the table. Or it has to be this puzzle the same time all the time. And if there's a missing piece from the puzzle, the child has a tantrum. So clearly we understand there's a challenge with flexibility. And where there's a challenge with flexibility, usually it comes with neurological deficits. Does a child imitate behaviors of others? So we're not talking about good or bad behaviors. We're talking about, that is a child able to imitate? And if a child is not able to imitate, they can't really learn. They can't really learn, because learning has a lot to do with seeing the other person do something and then being able to replicate and reproduce it in your own body. Is a child able to predict their behavior? Are they able to know a cause and effect? Do they know that if they hit somebody that there's consequences? Can they predict that? Most of the time they cannot. And that's a big challenge. There's a disconnect between cause and effect. And cause and effect happens at a very young age. We start to learn about cause and effect, where you press a button and it makes sound. So see how the early infancy in the first 3 to 4 months of life and the first year of life, how that little by little starts to build steps and makes connections for our ability to then learn consequences and predict how our actions affect others and influence others and influence us. If a child is in constant fantasy world, they're escaping their world, it's important to pay attention to see, why are they avoiding reality? What's going on? If the child is moving slower than others, they're not in rhythm with the class, or they're not in rhythm with the timing where they need to wake up, they need to get dressed. If they're slower, if it takes them a while if they're always playing catch up, pay attention and see, well, what's going on? Is there something going on? And usually when a child is slower than others, there's a coordination issue, there's a balance issue. The response time is delayed. And if the response time is delayed in terms of getting up and standing on line, I guarantee you that their processing speed is also delayed. And then their learning ability is compromised. A child who lacks empathy, I've seen children who just abuse animals in the most worst way possible. And they have no remorse. And they don't care about how they affect other people. And they hit and they scream and they yell and they are aggressive. And they really have no understanding that the other person can experience pain and suffering. They have no idea. So obviously that's something really important to pay attention to. Conversation loops, that's something that's a little more obvious. A child who has a messy desk, he never knows where his stuff are, everything's disorganized. A child who has a messy appearance, where their buttons are open, they're disheveled, their shoes are off, or they're on a different foot, or their socks are missing, or their buttons are not buttoned. That's a child that typically has a lack of understanding. Well, what do I do? What do I do with myself? How do I relate to my clothing? How do I button it? How do I, make myself more organized? They're not aware of how they can sequentially do things, how they can help themselves, how they can bring themselves into a more organized state. They just don't have an awareness of that. So that's also a telltale sign of, well, we have to look a little deeper. What's going on? Is there a balance issue? Is there a tactility issue? Is there anxiety going on? Is there a lack of focus? So that's all really, really important. And I think that's pretty much, we're at the end. So just to kind of go over, the takeaways that I would love all of you to have is to really always remember, the most important thing for learning is feeling safe and secure. If the child is unable to feel safe, they will not be able to learn, or it would be very, 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 very effortful. And feeling safe, sensation is the bottom-up approach, okay, to a child's development. So the sensation and the feeling is driving the cognitive development. So feeling an object, feeling the shape of something later on will allow and translate into, oh, now I know what that shape means. And symbolically, you have a representation of that shape in your mind. You have created a memory that now allows you to look at symbols without needing to touch the real object, because now you have it in your body. You have that memory. And like I said, learning is completely primed by our ability to move and our ability to develop our body. And when we're moving, we're constantly getting feedback. We're learning about our concept, about our image, about where we begin and end, about how heavy objects are, about how we can reach for something and pull it into our world, how we can get what we want, how we can move from one place to the next in order to be able to get what we want. All of that constantly feeds our vision, our thinking, our feeling, all of that. And that brings our brain together and builds sensory motor pathways that then we can rely upon when we're sitting in the classroom. And even though there is a general sequence in the way that the child development occurs in all the domains, I also want to mention that you got to really know what is the child ready for. So, for example, I recently read an article about research that was done in Sweden, and they actually said that a lot of children are not ready to start reading and start writing before the age of 6 because their visual system is not ready. So in America, I don't know how about you guys, in America, they start teaching children to recognize numbers and shapes and the whole reading and writing and shapes. They're starting very, very early at like 4 or 5 years old. And I could see that a lot of kids are not ready. They're just not ready. And children are really struggling because we're expecting them to do something that their muscles are not able to do yet because the system is way too immature. So it's just really important to honor the child and know what they're capable of and know what you can and cannot do. Even if the curriculum says that this is the age that the child is supposed to learn and write, but if you if you are teaching a child who has a developmental delay, please be honoring and respectful. What is this child's ability? What can we do? Are we jumping too high, too fast? Are we asking too much? Are we expecting too much of this child? Is their nervous system ready for this? Really, really important. And then next week, I really want to jump into, the specific neural movements that are really awesome that you can do at home as a parent, that you can do in the classroom to get the child ready from this survival mode and this frozen mode into this, okay, I'm more available, I'm more ready, I'm connected. I kind of have an idea where I am in space. Oh, okay, so now I'm able to look at the world and I'm able to hear the other person and I'm able to take something in new. Okay, so those neural movements are going to be very, very foundational for the brain organization. I will definitely provide tools and techniques of how do you build safety? How do you build security? How do you let a child, how do you support them? Even if they're really stressed out and anxious and you want to help them, how do you respond to them so you build that connection? And challenging behaviors, of course, we're always dealing with challenging behaviors. Children are unpredictable. Children that are neurotypical are unpredictable, but children that are, who have developmental delays, who have neurological deficits, sometimes are even more unpredictable. So it's important to know, well, what do we do when children act this way? What do we do? And I will definitely share with you some of the strategies that I find very, very beneficial in the classroom and at home and in the therapy session. So I think that's pretty much it for me of what I wanted to share. I'm actually really excited to hear from the audience, and I would love to get some questions answered. And I very much appreciate you listening to me. I know this is a little bit, intellectual, but I wanted to make sure that I get this out there.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for an enriching session. You've simplified it for us and you've taken the concept of brain development to that of child development in a whole new level. Thank you so much. We had a great learning today. I'm sure a lot of our participants would agree to it as well. As you've already shared, we have an upcoming session on every Thursdays. You can already book your calendar. Almost on every Thursdays, we have a session from Ability. So we have an upcoming workshop on the same module where you'll be learning the core of development activities to build the core skills of children. And for that, if you're interested, do check the link out that's being shared right now in the chat box. And we also have a new module starting week after that, which is starting on the 16th of September. We'll be talking about the foundational knowledge to understand about disability. So if you're interested for the same, do check out the link that's being shared right now in the chat box and register yourself for it. Ma'am, if you could stop sharing so that I'll also take them through the resources.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, ma'am. So as part of each of the workshops that you attend as an ability member. Most of the ability member would already be been aware of this, but for members who have joined us very, very recently, we know that understanding certain aspects and keeping all the milestones with you would be a little challenging. So that's why we have you covered with all the resources. I'm going to show you how is that you'll be able to access all the resources. So you already received a mail with the resources and also the overview document giving you an overview of the different aspects that we covered in today's workshop as a reference point for you. So after you log into your platform, just click on Student Success here and you will be redirected to this page. So you'll have to click on Exclusive Resources from the Resources tab. So all the resources that are being prepared for each of the workshops will be available here. So you have a plethora of resources which are available, which you can use with your children or your students in different settings. Do explore them. You have a detail about the resource. How is that you can use the resource, with what condition, what age group can this resource be used for? And also you have a provision to share the resource with your fellow friends who you think would benefit from it. And interestingly, you also have a provision to rate this resource to let us know how effective this has been for you all. So we will be able to deliver resources that fits your requirement. Not only this, sometimes we also run out of storage spaces. So we have you covered for that as well. So all you can do is bookmark certain resources which you think would be of real help to you. And by clicking on this bookmark section here, all the resources which you find are very handy would be saved separately. So that's how easy it is for you to access and get through all the resources. As part of today's workshop, you've shared a lot of developmental milestone checklists and charts, which you can keep handy and take a printout of and have it with you handily to refer to them, because referring to all the milestones can be quite difficult eventually. So I'm sure most of you would agree to me. Now let's begin with our Q&A session. So ma'am, can we start with the first question?
Absolutely.
Sure. So the first question is from Miss Venoria, who wants to know that if we know that a child is having developmental delay, what can be done in today's setting, given that everybody is working remotely and there are online sessions happening? So what can a therapist or a parent do to initiate a process? And what is the starting stage?
Yes. So the starting stage is, first of all, it's important to assess, is the child able to be independent in the session, or do they need support? So I have children, young children and young adults who I work with, who I know absolutely cannot work with me virtually without somebody else being present. And that's a reality that I needed to deal with, because when I started doing virtual sessions, I saw that a lot of kids start to just move away and they're not paying attention to me. So I'm just honest with the parent, and I just let them know that my assessment lets me know that virtually I cannot work with your child unless there is support, unless there is a caregiver present. So not everybody, it's not the most convenient thing, but it's an honest thing. So sometimes we just need to be honest, and we need to know our own limitations and the child's limitations. So that's one aspect. And the other aspect is that if the child is able to be independent and the child is able to sit there with you and you assess that, you know what, yeah, he can do it or she can do it, make sure that the environment is supportive for that. So once again, talk to the caregiver and make sure that there is a quiet environment where this child or this young adult can be in. I prefer more kind of closed in space, where you have a room where you can close the door, where you can don't have many distractions, where you have your headphones on, and if possible to have headphones on your child if he's able to or she able to have their headphones on, because the sound is then more concentrated and more focused into the inner ear, and it's easier to focus. So having some kind of a fidget toy, if it's possible, if the child really likes to fidget, if he needs to rub a rock, or they have to play with some kind of a toy to help them calm down. If they also, possibly if they need a little therapy ball to sit and bounce in order for them to be able to focus while you're talking to them. Those support systems to support the sensation of the child and to be able to feel their body as they're working with you with minimal distraction is really important. Also, make sure you understand that actually, I believe every 10 minutes you need to give a break. I do not agree with going for 45 minutes to an hour without stop. Actually, science suggests that we as human beings, in general, our attention span is maximum 10 minutes, maximum in terms of quality. Imagine a child who has neurological challenges and has to look at a screen and pay attention to you, who has auditory issues and visual issues. Do not go longer than 10 minutes. I would say even 5 minutes, and then take a break and see if you can just have them, sing a song, or have them stomp with their feet. Make sure you are making sure you give them breaks, you support them, you yourself are engaging. Make sure you're having fun, you're expressing yourself emotionally, you're connected to the child, and you're using their motivation to engage them. So these are the aspects that I would implement when you're working virtually. And you have to really collaborate with parents. You have to collaborate with parents. They need to be on your side because they need to organize this environment for the child.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your insights on it. I'm sure understanding the component of structure, collaborating with the parents are the key ways to go about it given today's situation. As you mentioned about the different milestones which are connected to each other, even the core areas, how it is connected to each other. Next, we have a question on that line from Mr. Kristen, who wants to know if a child doesn't crawl and misses that milestone, will that impact the child's development of handwriting? Is there any link on those lines?
Oh, what a wonderful, wonderful question. There's such an enormous link, just enormous. So when a child crawling is one of the foundational ways to develop the brain, because when a child is crawling, especially on his or her belly, now he is touching with the skin against the floor. So now you're beginning to develop your skin, a connection with the skin, with the floor. You're beginning to develop your body map. Now, when you're pushing off with your feet against the floor, now you're learning how small or how big your body is. You're learning with how much effort you have to move yourself against the floor. You're learning about gravity, and now balance is coming in. So when balance comes in, you begin to understand, oh, I know where I am in space. Whoa. If I know where I am in space, I know where up and down is. I know where left and right is. I know where sounds are coming from. Oh, wonderful. Now, our ability to balance supports our visual system. So when I'm talking about eyes working together, if the balance system is disorganized, the eyes will be compromised, specifically in working together as a team. So now think about handwriting. Handwriting has to happen in the context of the visual system. So if you have difficulty working with the eyes working together as a team because you haven't been able to develop your balance system, and your balance system does not support your eyes and does not give information to the muscles around your eyes, your vision is going to be compromised. So it's going to affect handwriting tremendously. The other part, handwriting, knowing up, down, left, and right, and diagonally. Every single letter, when we're writing it, has a very specific directionality. And when we teach children letters, we start from the bottom, go up, and then go down, or start from the top, go down, or go diagonally. If a child has not crawled, they don't have that understanding of their body and that relationship with gravity and that relationship with space, they don't have a clue what up means, what down means, what left means, what right means. They have no idea. So that unconscious pattern of starting to write and then not having the support of this, oh, I don't know where up is, I don't know where down is, I have no idea what's going on, they're going to have a very hard time organizing their handwriting. Very difficult. They are basically going to have a really hard time. And the mobility of the arm, when you're crawling, you're developing the shoulder, you're developing the muscles of your hands, and how the muscles of the hands, and as you're crawling, work together with your neck, work together with your head, and you're coordinating your movements. If you haven't crawled, your core muscles, your neck and your eyes, and the connection with eye-hand coordination are very limited, and the muscles usually are not developed. And then handwriting becomes arduous, impossible, effortful, and painful.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It's actually fascinating to know how different domains are actually connected to each other and can have an impact. I'm sure there's a lot of learning to take away from today's session. Next, we have a question from Ms. Muthu Rajeshwari, who wants to know what is the right age to understand and screen for developmental delays in children. Is there any specific age when we have to start looking for?
You know, I would start at the 6 months. This is how far I would go. And there are pioneers that I know who are looking at children and looking at young children, and they're looking at what's going on at a very, very young age. And you can actually tell if you understand the word reflexes. You can test a child at 6 months old and you can see if they're responding to these reflexive motor patterns. Are they responding accordingly? And if there's delayed response, or there is no response, or there is too much response, right away you could tell the nervous system is compromised and there are some challenges that might happen in the future. So you can start very, very early. Obviously, you have to have a real professional eye for this, because I think that parents cannot do this with their children. So at 6 months old, you cannot test your child's reflexes unless you understand and you go to a professional. However, at 6 months old, you could tell, is the child using their eyes to follow an object? Are they using their eyes to track you? Are they engaging, curious about the world? Is there vitality in their eyes? Are they moving enough? Are they propelling themselves forward? Are they curious about the world? You can notice that as a parent, you could tell right away if that's happening. And if there is a lack of curiosity and a lack of exploration, and if the eyes are not really engaged, and if there's a flat affect, and if there is lack of movement, right away, or the child is very fussy, or they tantrum a lot, or cry a lot, or have a hard time going to sleep, those are red flags immediately. Something's going on. We got to figure it out. Let's go to a neurologist. Let's go investigate further what's happening with my child. I would recommend not to wait. A lot of doctors are trained to let you know, oh, don't worry, your child will grow out of this. I beg of you, please do not listen to those doctors. Do not listen to those doctors. Nobody grows out of anything, almost never. If there's something going on and you feel like there's a challenge, immediately address it. Go and find out. And if one doctor doesn't hear you, go to another doctor. Go to as many doctors as you need until you feel heard. Because mother's intuition is the strongest guiding force that you have. And I'm talking to those of you who obviously 6 months old, babies, they are not in school, so teachers wouldn't know. But a therapist also can recommend, and assess a child at 6 months old, So just really make sure that you pay attention and start as early as possible.
Beautifully put, ma'am. Understanding your intuition as parents is the key, and starting as early is never too late. So starting early intervention is the key to go about making any change to your child's development per se. Next, we have a question from Ms. Serline, who wants to know how is it we can assist child with a developmental delay, specifically if they have a trust issue with the parent.
If they have a trust issue with the parent.
Yes.
Yes. I wanted to make sure it's the parent, not the teacher, not the therapist themselves. Yeah. Beautiful question. And, I'm one of those therapists. I really work holistically. So for me, the emotional world and the connectivity of the child with themselves, with their parents, with the therapist is basically foundational to everything I do. It's just foundational. And it's what happens is, if there is a trust issue with the parent, what I would do is I would do a session where I have a parent observe and watch me facilitate a connection with the child. Because a lot of parents, even though they're so well-intentioned, they're so in love with their children, they are anxious themselves because, we live in an intense world. We live in an intense time. And in general, being a parent, no one really teaches us. It's kind of like one of those things that you don't have a manual for. So it's kind of overwhelming and you want to do it right. And you don't really have a manual. And you have your own issues you have to deal with. And then you have this beautiful little baby that you want to make sure that everything is so perfect and wonderful, but you're afraid, you have your own fears and you don't know what to do. And what happens is the child picks up on those fears. The child picks up on your anxieties. And what happens? They want to avoid you because they are overwhelmed. Not that they don't love you, but they're so sensitive and they cannot handle your anxiety. And they cannot handle your fears. So they need to move away from you and they become fussy and they become, anxious because they're basically mirroring the state of your nervous system. So what I do is I do a session with the child in front of a parent, whether it's virtually, whether it's, face-to-face, it depends on the situation. But I show the parent what cues are we looking for when the child is trusting or not trusting? When the child is open or closed? When the child is ready for learning or for not ready for learning? And I teach them how to slow down, how to relax, how to breathe, how to be with their children without needing to expect their children to perform and respond to them. Because often when a parent is anxious, they're expecting something from their child and they're expecting a certain response. And when they don't get it, they become even more anxious. So I let parents experience what it's like to be in silence with their children without any expectation. It's such a beautiful, beautiful place to be. Your heart is fully open and you're with your child and you're observing their cues, and you only respond to them when they are even giving you any signs of they're interested in you, or they are wanting to connect with you, or they're interested in an object that you have. Otherwise, you take a deep breath, you relax, and you just hang out with your child, and you could sing a song, and you could take a deep breath, and you just enjoy them and watch their response and watch their connectivity. And it's really, really one of my most favorite things to do in the world, is to help a parent to co-regulate with their child's nervous system. It's a beautiful process.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for the lovely insights. Next, we have an interesting question from Ms. Rachel, who wants to know what is your take on this genetic and environmental role in development? Because there are few theorists who believe that genetics plays a major role, while there are others who believe that environment is very crucial for the development of the child. So what is your take on it?
What a beautiful question. I didn't expect this. This is really lovely. Thank you so much. So I just want to kind of preface this with, I'm going to give you, obviously, my personal opinion. Everybody has their own belief system. So I'm only sharing my own belief system. So I have come to believe from experience that I believe that the environment is much, much stronger of an influence on the genetic expression as opposed to the genetic inheritance itself. First of all, I believe that gives us much more power to be able to really shift a child, because if we believe that this child is only going to develop as much as their genetic allows them, that is very limiting. Okay, I don't like to put limits on children. I want to have a full, infinite possibility for the potential of this child to develop. So what I do is I create as much possibility for the connection, for the safety, for the security of this child, not to experience stress and anxiety on a daily basis. Because when we experience stress, when we experience anxiety, it activates the blueprint that we have, the genetic blueprint, and it begins to unwind and activate the blueprint that allows us to actually activate stress in our nervous system, which creates diseases. So there's a lot of research on this. There's a guy whose name is Bruce Lipton. He does something called, there's a book called The Biology of Beliefs. And he clearly scientifically states that our environment guides our genetic expression, not vice versa. So I will do everything to make sure that this child has the most possibility to develop, because the environment he or she is in is guiding a healthy development and is communicating to the nervous system. You're safe to be curious, you're okay, mommy's here, daddy here, you have support, and that really stimulates and triggers the genetic expression of a healthy development. And we keep developing that part of ourselves that focuses on our healthy development and our ability to achieve any potential possible. So I firmly believe in this, and I firmly encourage everyone to read and understand how much environment influences our genetic expression. And there's a word for it. It's called epigenetics in the world. So if anybody's interested in that topic, please take a look, because it is very powerful and it really, really matters in child development.
Wonderful, ma'am. So environment is the key to go for you, per se. So on those lines where you talk about connection, I have another question from Ms. Lalita, who wants to know how important is simple gestures like tapping on the child's shoulder, or like hugging the child, or just giving a high five to the child, or a simple gesture like a smile, help in building the child's confidence, and how is it helpful in improving the outcomes of our sessions, per se?
Oh, wonderful question. So I just, once again, my experience, I do as much touch as possible in a fun, playful way. Okay, I love being playful. I love supporting a child's ability to feel themselves. So any kind of high fives with joy, any kind of facial expressions that expresses that, oh, I see you. Oh my gosh, yes, I honor you. Everything you're doing is wonderful. You're doing your very best. And you have this joy and you have this animation in your face. That is so, so, so important. Putting your hand gently on the child's shoulder, I've mentioned this a little bit early, gives them that, oh, somebody here, somebody gets me, I can relax now. Yes, through touch, through loving touch, you could communicate to the child, you're okay, you're safe, I got you. I'm not expecting you to do more than what you can do. I'm here with you. I'm going to be patient with you, and we're going to have fun. We're going to do this together. So absolutely, as long as the child is not moving away from you. Because as much as I personally love touch and depression, I want to connect that way with children, sometimes it's not possible because children are not ready for that. And some children are so sensitive to touch that they are not able to receive that. So honoring the individual and the child that's in front of you, making sure that if you're touching them, they can receive and enjoy it. And maybe they cannot receive touch on their hands, but they can receive touch on their feet. Feet might be a little more receptive to figure out, well, what part of the body is okay with touch and what part of the body is not, and make sure you honor that.
Wonderful, ma'am. So next we have a question from Miss Lendi, who wants to know, in certain tradition, at least in the Asian countries, there's a belief that if a child starts to eat or move objects with the left hand, the parent have a tendency to actually reverse that and ask the child to use his or her right hand to write and do the other things. So is it a good thing to do for parents? What is your take on it?
What a beautiful question. Once again, so beautiful. So my take on it is that I like to go with what the child naturally wants to do. That's my preference. This is just who I am. Obviously, there's going to be a school of thought that's very different. I really believe very strongly that letting the child lead with the hand that feels the most natural for them is the way to go. And actually, I have a very clear example. So a year and a half ago, I was working with a teen who was 14 years old, and I was having a really, 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 really hard time with handwriting, and he's already 14 years old, and he was just getting embarrassed and just very uncomfortable. And the teachers were complaining, and we realized that actually they taught him how to write with the right hand, but his natural ability was with the left hand. And the mom told me, I saw him want to write with the left hand, but I insisted on doing the right hand because that's what everybody says. And we actually started letting him write with the left hand, and he loved it so much. And even though in the beginning it was kind of difficult and he was just like enjoying it, but it was not really legible because he's still so used to the right hand, he started teaching himself, and with the help of his mom, to actually learn the alphabet from the beginning and to do it from the left hand. And he is loving writing with his left hand. That's all he wants to do. It took some time, but that's what he wants to do. And they allowed him for accommodations at school. They knew he's learning with his left hand now. And he started doing it, and he was writing a little slower than others, but the teacher didn't mind. And she gave him a printout of what to do at home. And she gave him a printout of homework that he didn't have a chance to write down. She sent it home, emailed it to the parents. And it was just really amazing to see how this kid thrived just by learning to write with the hand that is natural to him. So I don't recommend to pressure your children to write with the right hand. I would just let them do it however they can.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for clearing the air on it. Letting the child be with your natural strength is the key, and that is the actual development per se. So next we have a question from Ms. Anna. Based on the presentation, she has a question where you spoke about the thinking emotional brain, right? So she has a question that she has a child who's 3 years of age. His thinking brain has developed, which means he's able to understand colors, shapes, identify animals, etc. But whereas his licit and also the emotional brain, the brain of survival and the emotional brain, is actually slower than the thinking brain. So why is that? And is there a reason that one part of the brain develops more quickly than the other? Or is it a sequential pattern?
I wouldn't say it's a sequential pattern. What I would say is that this is a compensation strategy. Okay, so this 3-year-old is relying on his or her brain and the thinking brain and the to figure out the world, because the emotional world is too challenging. It's either not available or there's too much emotion. So she's guarding herself and holding back the emotional part of herself. And she's shutting that off to survive the environment or the world she's in. I don't know her situation. I don't know what's going on with the family situation, but it's clear to me that she's over relying on the thinking brain and she's not allowing the emotional to come forward. And that is a protective pattern. And for me, if I was working with this child, I would actually really figure out what's going on emotionally and see if there's a way that I could gently, on her terms, engage her emotion. I think it's a him or her. I'm so sorry. I wasn't sure about that. But engage the child emotionally. I would do puppets. I would play with puppets. I would introduce different stories and I would act them out and see how she responds. And then I would introduce, well, this child got hurt and she's not feeling really well and she feels this. And how do you feel? And see if you can engage her sharing her emotions about somebody else that has nothing to do with her or him. And I would really start working on that organization and activation of emotions such that she actually connects the emotions and the thinking brain. It'll help her in the long run to be a much more integrated human being.
Thank you for that perspective, ma'am. Sometimes it can compensate for something that's still developing or getting underdeveloped, right? That's a great insight. I think Ms. Anna can learn a lot from that. We have a lot of questions overflowing. I'll take the questions that's coming in majority. We'll have a lot of sessions on these lines to address most of your questions. So participants, don't worry if your questions are not getting answered in today's session. So I'm taking the questions based on some themes. So there are questions from Ms. Alyssa who wants to know if a child doesn't cry or if a child cries too much, is that a sign? Does it trying to say something in terms of the developmental pattern or something on those lines? If you can share some insights on it.
Oh, absolutely. Once again, thank you so much for that question. If the child never cries or the child cries too much, there is a telltale sign. There's a red flag, 100% red flag. And I would really pay attention to it. What I would do is I would ask what's going on. I would ask the mom or the dad, how often did the child cry at home or not cry? Does he ever cry? Was there ever a situation where the child cried? Does the child cry when they are pinched? So do they respond to sensation? Do they respond to pain? Sometimes a child doesn't cry because they don't have pain sensations. They haven't developed the receptors for pain. So it's really important to start realizing, because it's unsafe, not to have pain receptors. So we need to figure out, is it that they're not feeling themselves, that the information is not coming in and they're not able to feel, so they're not crying? Because crying is a very emotional process. Or if they're crying all the time, what's going on? Why are they so overwhelmed emotionally? Is there something that's hurting them? Is there inflammation? Are they having a hard time where they cannot figure out what's going on, that they're not able to plug into the world, connect, that everything is confusing and they're just scared? Sometimes children cry a lot because they're scared, because they don't understand the connection to the world and how to respond to the world, and the sounds and emotions and the subtle expectations of parents sometimes are very scary and overwhelming for a child, because they're so tuned in into their parents or they're so tuned in into their therapists. So it's really important to start asking questions, start observing the child. When do they cry? When do they not cry? And what activates them? Really, really important.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for sharing your insight. I'm sure this will help a lot of parents, young parents who are actually having toddlers as kids, to actually pay attention to details. So let's take the last two questions for today. One is from Ms. Sashi, who wants to know, because certain children have a personality or a passive patterns of characteristic where they actually do not want to do certain things or a little laid back compared to the other children. So how is that we can demarcate whether it's a sign of a developmental or a neurological problem, or it is just a personality pattern of the child?
Well, here's the thing. I completely understand the personality patterns, and I think it's very wise to pay attention, because yes, there are people who are much more extroverted. There are people who are much less extroverted and more introverted. It's important to honor that. However, every child who is really, really, really a happy child and everything's okay will want to engage and explore and be curious about the world. Now, they might be curious about something so particular that has, that another child might not be curious about. They might not want to, run around and be as rambunctious as another child. They might want to be, more curious about, octopi, and another child is very rambunctious at running around, and they might want to be curious about, cars or trucks. So you got to watch the interest, but you got to see, is there some interest somewhere? Because I'm telling you, if the child has no interest and they're not engaging in the world, there's a challenge. Every child is curious and engaged. You just have to figure out what is their engagement, what is their curiosity, and maybe their ability to want to connect to another human being is not as prevalent as someone else. Some people are not so much into connection or being stimulated by people, but are they stimulated by anything? Are they interested in anything? Are they initiating? Are they curious? That's what I want to know. And if that has nothing to do with introvert or extrovert, that's just human nature and a healthy child development. And when everything's okay, you know and see that that is there and that is present.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for addressing that. I think that will clear a lot of air of confusion that's there with the personality as well as the developmental criteria. So let's take the last question for today. It's from Ms. Banumati, who wants to know how important, what is your take on premature children or premature birth, and how is it having an impact on the developmental challenges of children? Is there any direct link? There are assumed to be some direct links, right? If you can share some light on it.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much. Beautiful question. 100%. There's also a lot of research on this, and I see this on a daily basis, that preemie or premature baby that's, born before 9 months, 100% that influences their neurological behavior, neurology, and how they develop. It very much influences their muscles and muscle tone, which is really a telltale sign whether a child is developing in a healthy way or there are some challenges. So this is where if you have a child that was born premature and you are concerned and you're not sure what's going on, if there is any challenges, and I would right away go get an assessment and not be concerned or worried that something is going to go wrong, but I would just find out, according to the norm, where is my child? Where does he or she relate, and where do they in that bell curve distribution, the normal bell curve distribution, where are they in comparison to other children? And not to make it right or wrong, but just to have a reality check. Is my child developing properly? And if they're not, once again, just because a child is born premature, it does not mean that this is a prison sentence. Once again, it's important to understand where the delay was and to properly start approaching the development of the child. What are the milestones? What milestones are missing? What can we do to support their physical development, emotional development? And wherever they are, start and match them where they're at, and then slowly move further and further. And typically these children catch up, no problem at all. You just have to make sure that you meet them where they're at and you identify that there's something to be addressed.
Thank you so much, ma'am. What an amazing session it has been, and what learning we've had today from you, understanding in depth about the brain, its connections, its link to each other, and the aspect of development per se. You've made it very simple and easy for all of us to understand the link. And thank you so much, given that you're also staying up late night to actually explain this to all of us here because of your timing from a different time zone. Thank you so much. It shows how passionate you are about passing on your knowledge with all our fellow members. We're all grateful and thankful for what you've been doing to all of us. Thank you so much for this fruitful session. And thank you so much, all participants, for actively engaging and sharing your insights and inputs during today's session. I've seen that the feedback link has already been shared. I'll request the team members to share the feedback link again, and do let us know how effective this session was for you so that we can improve the experience with all of you all. Ma'am, final words to all our participants before we meet you the next week.
The final words, I feel, are like pay attention, pay attention, pay attention. That is the most important. When you pay attention, you know what to do.
Wonderful. Attention is the key to start anything in life. Thank you so much, ma'am. More power to you. And thank you, all participants. If you're interested to know more about the practical strategies and ways to build in the core skills, do attend our upcoming session the next week, Thursday. Don't miss that out. And also, we have an upcoming workshop on the foundational knowledge for understanding disability and disability management, which will be happening on the 16th, which is again a Thursday. So the registration link for all of it is being shared right now. And I would like to reiterate the recording and the PPT for today's session and the certification will be shared with you all in some time. Be assured with that. Unless we meet you for the next time, it's a big fight from Team Ability. This is Revati signing off.
Thank you so much, Revati. Bye-bye.